A very good afternoon to one and all. Today I am Dr. Pallavi Patil from the Modern College of Pharmacy Nigri, Yamunanagar, and we will start with the lecture that is column chromatography. Now column itself presented a one type of a column, a deep container, and it has a type of a particularly shape in the long. Now the arrangement of this column is a one plug at the bottom, and just like a conical flask, or you have a conical flask but your one end is just arise like a you have to just filter with the filter unit. Then the glass hose is presented, and at the end these sessions we have two type of the phases. The one phase is a mobile phase that we called as a solvent, and adsorbent is a present we called as a stationary phase. Now in these both stationary phases, or in this column has a mobile phase and the stationary phase, and in the stationary phase we need to add a solvent we called as a mobile phase. The mobile phase settled on the stationary phase that contain the adsorbent. Now in this we have to need what the samples you are take as a considered of to be separate. The mixture of compound you are just took into the this above the surface of the topmost surface of the column, and just keep a same position at the till the color combinations of all mixtures compound get separated. Now in these separations is happen by using this plug, and here the wool type of the material is present which is not allow the adsorbent to go outside from the column. So this type of arrangement we are looking. In this way we have these a column chromatography certain contains like introduction, history, then definition, principle and classification. How the experimental techniques we need for the column chromatography. What type of the requirement we need to perform the column chromatography. Applications, advantages, disadvantages and references. Now in these introductions we will be looking for the definition that is chromatography is a physical method, and in this method we have to separate the different mixture of compounds is get distributed in the two phases. For one phase we called as a stationary phase, and second is a mobile phase. Now in this the stationary phase may be as a solid, liquid or is a gel form. It may be it can possible any form of this stationary phase, but the packing of the column we just need a simple glass column which is transparent and easily you can look at it at the distribution of different compositions. Now the separate of the layer that is on the surface of the column, it may be a plate, it may be a glass we called as TLC or HPTLC, that is a thin liquid chromatography or high performance thin liquid chromatography. A certain way it may be possible a gas as a mobile phase and liquid film is maybe a stationary phase. So the mobile phase may be liquid, solid or the mixture of this. After this we will be looking for the principle. The solid, stationary phase and the liquid mobile phase is used for the separations. The principally basic on the separation is based on the adsorption mechanism. Adsorptions on the stationary phase as a stationary phase, and the adsorptions happens by the combination of mobile phase and your composition in the mixture form. One by one, the partitions and the adsorptions happen by the different type of textures present in the composition of mixtures. They get separated from one another. The depending on that, the great absorption power is absorbed in the upper part of the column, and The lower portion of the column is having a different type of composition adsorptions. Those who has a less absorption power, that is will be the first compound to be elute, to be eliminated from the column. This process is get continued as the reaction of the reactions or the result of the material at the end when the different type of compositions get separated from one another, and it goes on later on. Now the type of interactions in between the stationary phase and solute is reversible in the nature. Keep in mind that it is a reversible in the nature. It may happens, it's get out. What type of the advantages is having in the column chromatography? There is any type of the mixtures can be separated by a column type of the chromatography, or any quantity of mixtures can be separated on the basis of their color compositions and the consistency when they are take one by one separation and adsorptions happen on the stationary phase. And then why the choice of the mobile phase? We can check out the mobile phase in a different type of combinations and the arrangement. What is the disadvantages of this? The disadvantages is having that these are time consuming. We need a very much time to get allow the systems or the column should be just stand ahead and looking the separations of the different composition by their adsorptions happen on the stationary phase. The amount of quantity or the solute or the solvent are required which are expensive. The solute that you are designed how much quantity you needed to separate or used, but the solvent for this is required somehow high amount, and if it is expensive, the total chromatographic system this column may get expensive. Now uses of maximum adsorptions, you need to try the slurry form, gel form, adsorption or the stationary phase prepared, and you have to pour the stationary phase entire to the system in the column and just get out a settle down, and later on you have to start your practical perform. After the completion of this and entered into the solvent as a mobile phase through the systems, you have to need the dry, then bubble should not be present. These all are possibly need to take a precautions in this column chromatography. The slurry consistency is very much important to perform this column chromatography, so you need to take a very carefully handling of this column chromatography. In this way, if they have to need a certain more accuracy, more precisions to your performance, and get a very less and minimum chances to avoid your errors manually. In that conditions, you need to take a more precautions. Now the column adsorptions have a certain theory. Now the more affinity towards the stationary phase, it is a slow, very slow traveler, and the compound which has a lesser affinity, it means it is travel very fast on the stationary phase and get elute fast. Now the mixture of a compound we call that adsorbent dissolve in the mobile phase, that is elute first through the column, and the column consisting stationary phase, that is adsorbent. The compound that you want to separate is called as adsorbate, and the stationary phase we call as adsorbent. The traveling of this affinity is somehow comparative differ from one to another. This differences is depend on which type of the affinity they are playing towards the stationary phase. If it is a more, they can travel very slow. If it is a less affinity, they can travel very fast, and in this way they can separate it out by using one by one illusion. Now the column is containing stationary phase. Now these are the empty column. Then you loaded your samples, and if the sample is a composition of different type of compounds with their very defined color differences, they can separate like this. Now the first one is having a low affinity, so it can travel fast, it can elute fast. Then the second one, you can look at here how the sample collections happens, and the third one is we called as easily get separate out because there is no any combination with the anyone. So these type of separations happen in red, then green, and last one is the blue. These are the with the different composition of the mixtures and separated on base of column chromatography. Now we can looking for the how the rate of movement of the mobile phase we are giving to their practical way. Dynamically, the equilibrium is a composition of movement down to the column and a defined rate depending factor. Now the rate depending factor is based on n, that this is maybe a composition of the column which is we are used in the HPLC, and these rate, the rate of movement of components and rate of movement of mobile phase, we are called as RF value find out. It means of rate depending factor of movement. Now with these practicals way and calculations, what type of we needed the practical requirement. First, we needed a stationary phase which is we are using in the inner side of the column. Then the mobile phase. Mobile phase is depend on the selection of the mobile phase is depend on what type of composition of compounds you are going to separate. Then a column characters. What type of the column? There are a different type of column are ready-madely available in the market that we can use, and in this column they have a fixed type of stationary phase present in the inner side of the column. Now the preparation of column is also manually also you can prepare, or the automatically prepared column you can purchase directly, but it is a somehow expensive. But the result way, the result they are giving result is very excellently as compared to the preparative of column. After the selection of column, you are looking for the introduction of your sample, how you pour the sample in the inner side of the column, and that development of the technique. After the development, we need a detection of a components. Then detection of the components, you need a requirement of components. How the recovery required, the required amount you have to elute what you have to pour in the systems, and that you can detect it with the using certain hyphenated unit, that is HPTLC systems, and that eluted you can screenized and scrutinized by using of their peak height and peak width. So these type of experiments we are needed to perform in this way. The stationary phase are very good in use of the organic substances, carbon, starch and cellulose, and the inorganic substances is made up by the stationary phase like silica gel, fluoride and alumina. So these type of compositions we are needed to prepare the adsorbent in the column chromatography. So here we are selected a certain principle, advantages, disadvantages, mobile phase and stationary phase selection on the TLC plate. Now in this way We are just look for the separation